All right. Good evening, Danvers. I'm Juneteen Joko, Chair of the Danvers Human Rights and Inclusion Committee. Welcome to our April 2022 meeting. I will start by having Bob Gamer read us the Native Land Acknowledgement.
We acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded territory of the Namkig people. Historical evidence shows that the Namkig were peaceful in their relationship with European settlers. However, their population depleted rapidly due to the Europeans' introduction of smallpox. As we begin our meeting, we acknowledge and honor the Namkig community, who were the original inhabitants of what is now known as Danvers, Massachusetts. Let us take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered up and support the resilience and strength that Indigenous people have shown worldwide.
Thank you very much, Bob. I'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the citizen queries. This is if any resident has question, comments on things that are not already on the agenda. Yes, ma'am. You want to just go to the microphone and introduce yourself?
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Paula Jones, and I am a proud resident of this town and also running for the one open seat on school committee. I am here tonight because in running on transparency, trust, parental involvement, and students first, I feel you have a member on your committee who went over the line and it must be addressed. An email was sent to the president of the teachers union in the city where I currently work from your committee member's union email address. That email was forwarded to two of my wonderful employees, a first and second grade teacher who are both union representatives in my building, who then came to me concerned that someone was discrediting me and acting unethically. I immediately reached out to your committee member and asked to meet as there seemed to be some misinformation on her part. That request was immediately declined. This does not help move our town forward. To me, this seems to go against everything this committee stands for. I don't believe she thought it would ever get back to me, but I have built transparency, truth, and support into the school as a leader, and I am so very grateful that my dedicated teachers came to me. I am feeling heartbroken to be here standing in front of you tonight. I am a mother of two beautiful children, a wife, and an educator, and I jumped into this race with 2 feet. No one asked me to run. I never wavered or looked back. I did it because I love our town, I love our kids, I want to support our teachers, and do public service for the community. I will continue to share my positive message and continue to stay positive that this town can and will move forward, and that every day we will do what is best for all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other public business? Oh, any other resident? Here now. Okay, I will take the chair prerogative and move things out of order here a little bit. So I'll move on from number 3 to number 10, which is the discussion that we started last month regarding the NAACP report and recommendations. We can do that after.
Okay.
Thank you. But before we discuss the recommendations of the report, in the report, pardon me, I was informed last night by the town manager that Sergeant Baldassari had requested a reassignment at the end of the school year. It was accepted by the chief and supported by the town manager. I will now move on to the first recommendation, if I can get my paperwork here. which is the hiring process. So I don't know how we want to conduct this. I call this more like a working group thing, not necessarily a debate per se. So
Dee, I think it might be helpful to start. I know Jamie, our chief level, had sent us that list of talking about a lot of the things they've already implemented. So I don't know if somebody would like to maybe just summarize those so we don't start from ground zero on this, maybe?
that's exactly what I was looking for.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. Do you have your copy?
Yes. Yep.
So I'll have Kristen kind of give us a summary of what the hiring process is currently looks like.
Sure. So I'm just reading this from a summary from chief level. I'm not an expert in civil service, so I can't answer any questions here. And chief level is unable to attend tonight. Otherwise, he would. So I don't want to read several pages, but in summary, really, the civil.
I think
Yeah.
it's okay if you want to.
You want me to read it?
That's fine.
Okay. Okay, I will read it. The Danvers Police Department is currently a civil service agency and must follow the rules and regulations of the Civil Service Commission regarding the selection of new officers. I would like to provide a brief overview of the process. In 2022, the Massachusetts Civil Service Commission began offering an annual police officer examination. Prior to 2022, the test was held every 2 years. This recent change to an annual examination was designed to provide communities with more candidates. During the civil service examination process, an applicant can receive several designations. The following are in order and include a brief description of each preference. 534 CSC preference. A candidate has appealed a decision made by the appointing authority, typically a bypass for a position, and the commission has ruled in favor of a candidate. The remedy is placing them at the top of the civil service list. 402A preference. A parent was killed in the line of duty. 402B preference. A parent was permanently and totally disabled in the line of duty. A disabled veteran in residency. After the exam has been taken and graded by the Civil Service Commission, an eligibility list is created. Once a community is ready to hire police officers, a request is made to civil service. An eligibility list is created based on the number of candidates the community intends to hire. This number is based on a times 2+1 formula. For example, if the Danvers Police Department was to hire 3 new officers, they would be able to choose from the top 7 candidates. 3 times 2 plus 1 equals 7. The Civil Service Commission notifies the top candidates, and they are provided 7 days to sign the list stating they would accept the position if offered. The list is provided to the department in order of the preferences mentioned above. Candidates the Civil Service Commission has determined were unfairly bypassed for a position, followed by children who had a parent killed in the line of duty, a parent permanently and totally disabled in the line of duty, disabled veterans, and then residency. The department is required to hire candidates in the order they appear on the list unless they can articulate and document a legitimate reason to bypass a candidate. If a candidate is bypassed, they have the right to appeal the decision to the Civil Service Commission. If they are successful in their appeal, they will receive the 534 CSC preference and will be moved to the top of the current or next exam. The residency requirement gives every Danvers resident who takes the test seniority over residents from other communities. A candidate who received a 70% on the exam and lived in Danvers 1 year prior to the date of the exam would come before a resident from Beverly who had a 100% score on the same exam. A comprehensive background investigation and candidate review is conducted by the Danvers Police Department, and recommendations are made to the town manager, who is the appointing authority in Danvers. Background investigations. In 2015, I was promoted to the rank of captain, and I was assigned the responsibility to overhauling the selection process to include background investigations. The following is an outline of the current process. Recruits are invited to an orientation session where the selection process is reviewed and the candidates are provided a 23-page questionnaire. Each recruit is assigned to a certified background investigator. Each background takes an investigator 40+ hours to complete. These background investigations include home visits, a neighborhood canvass, documentation and assessment of all tattoos for content, personal and professional reference checks, federal, state, and local criminal record checks, a thorough review of all social media content. Once the backgrounds are completed, each candidate participates in an integrity interview. This interview is conducted by a captain, a lieutenant, a sergeant, a detective, and the assigned background investigator. Everyone involved in this process is a certified background investigator and has extensive experience in conducting complex investigations and has training in interview and interrogation techniques. These interviews typically last between an hour and an hour and a half. During these interviews, candidates are asked a series of questions and are evaluated on their responses to the following topics: prejudice, behavior, bias, use of excessive force, duty to intervene, communication skills. The candidates are then provided a writing assignment, which is typically centered around current trending issues in law enforcement or in the community. These assignments are later graded. At the completion of the process, the operations captain presents their recommendations for appointments, and the candidates are interviewed by the police chief and then the appointing authority. Important note: in the NAACP report, a recommendation was made to involve the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee in the process. In our current process, this would be extremely difficult. The town manager and I have decided to include the new Director of Equity and Inclusion in the review of our integrity questions and participate in the interview process at the Chief of Police level. This will allow the DEI to voice any concerns he or she may have about a candidate to the town manager before the final interview and conditional offer of employment is made. Once a conditional offer of employment is made by the town manager, the candidate must complete the following: successfully complete a civil service approved physical exam, successfully complete a psychological screening with a licensed and approved psychologist. Our current psychologist is Dr. Lawrence Kelly from Wakefield, Mass. This process includes the following: the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory 2 restructured form, Personality Assessment Inventory, 16 Personality Factor, 5th edition, clinical interview. Submit an acceptable credit report, successfully complete a civil service physical aptitude test, successfully complete a police academy entry physical fitness test, submit a candidate certification form to the Massachusetts Peace Officer Standards Commission, post a 6-month MPTC training academy, complete a 2-month field training program.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Thank you. And also, I forgot to mention that the town manager has graciously agreed to be here with us tonight in case any member of the committee had questions about these processes. Any questions or comments? Yes, Bob.
Yes, the police are mandated to follow these civil service requirements. You know, it's in-house. But the purpose of this committee, I mean, our provenance is to prevent these racist attacks, this racial harassment that happened through the hiring of someone inappropriate. If we don't have a we are acting through the.
Bob, I'll just correct you. I won't put it in the terms that there's been racial attack by anybody on our force that we know of. So we
No,
want
I'm not.
we want to be clear that this is not an indictment of.
No, I'm speaking like theoretically here.
Okay.
Our input, you know, through the Director of Equity and Inclusion, who I hope is the greatest in the world, and I'm sure you are. I so look forward to the work you're going to be doing. But she's speaking for us without any of our interplay with us. So I question whether we can, as an ancillary, add to the civil service, why it's not possible to have just as an ancillary requirement that we have this group under the DGI. Did I say that right? DEI.
yeah.
Where we can voice our take on things,
On the hiding.
on who's being hired.
I think maybe the town manager can help me here.
I can offer I'll offer a short and a long response. The short response is no. The longer response is that this body exists as an advisory board of the select board, and the select board hires, evaluates, and can terminate the town manager. The way that hiring in the town of Danvers works is that I am the hiring authority, so I have to ensure that processes are in place that are fair to candidates, consistent with the law, et cetera. And so I do think that this group will have a voice in the process that we're talking about through our DEI. That's one of the recommendations we readily agreed with at the very beginning with the NAACP when they suggested that we look at modifying to the extent that we can. So as the chief said in the background, for many years we've done extensive background, trying to seek out, looking at everything from body art to social media presence to interviews with neighbors to the questions in the interviews themselves to try to ferret out the things you're describing. Moving forward, we'll have the DEI as part of that process. And certainly the input this group can provide is through the DEI into that process.
Okay, that's what I was.
Yep.
That's what I was looking for.
Thank you. And, okay. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, one question if I could.
Yes.
Steve, through you, Mr. Chairman, Steve, several years ago, I know before you came on, I believe, there was a vote at town meeting which there was a motion made or a warrant article submitted to either take hiring of police or maybe it was just the chief out of the civil service program. Which was that? Was it just the chief?
I'm glad you think it was several years ago. 7.5 years in, it does feel like, some days it feels like much longer than that. That was my first town meeting.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah,
Thought it was
Chief
longer
Chief
ago than
Willett
that.
had announced his retirement, and I had made a recommendation to the board that we look at removing the position from civil service, not because I didn't think Pat Ambrose was going to be our next police chief, but that on a moving forward basis, it made sense to me that we would be able to choose from as broad a field as possible. Town meeting voted that down by nine votes.
But that was only the chief's position, not
Just the
all
chief.
officers, okay.
Correct.
So that civil service is mandated by law in Massachusetts.
So communities can exit this, there's a process to leave the civil service, and that happens from time, I think every year there's probably at least one home rule petition, give or take, at the legislature, but that's a locally initiated process that has to be approved by the state.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I remember that vote, and Mr. Bartha was here then, only a few years ago. I think the vote was taken the same day we voted as in a presidential election. No? Town meeting.
Town meeting.
Town meeting, yeah. That was something different, I'm sorry. But I guess the question I have is, when you say the town can withdraw, can a town or a municipal authority withdraw from the civil service? Just for the chief or for other police officers, or how does that work? I mean, give me a little bit more of details.
I'm admittedly not an expert on the civil service. There may
Right.
only be one or two experts on the civil service in the state, and they work for the Civil Service Commission.
Right.
It's a very complicated series of regulations and law. But essentially, a community, typically what happens is it's negotiated, if a police department is in the civil service, there would be a negotiation at the bargaining table as part of the collective bargaining process. And then coming out of that, something would be put before the town meeting or in a city before the city council. And then I believe that goes to the state legislature where they have to vote to, because if you're civil service, I believe it's written into state law. Putting poor Robin, but an expert, after I said nobody's an expert, but, so that's the problem. You'd have to, it's a local process that makes its way to the legislature, and then it's approved by the legislature.
So you have to go through the bargaining unit first, then the town has to go into the state basically, and it could apply for anyone in the department at that point.
So the chief and the department are separate, as I understand. So the chiefs, yes, it's separate. So you wouldn't necessarily, I'm going out, after saying I'm not an expert, I'm going to be offering answers that I'm not fully confident in, but you certainly wouldn't be saying we're going to pull our patrol officers out of the civil service but leave our sergeants and lieutenants in
Yeah.
the civil service. You'd be looking at the department.
Well, see, I got, honestly, then I didn't understand it, to be honest with you. I thought for some reason, that went before town meeting, I think now, I think it was because of the police chief, but I understood it to be all appointments within the police department. That's not the case, obviously. So, when you read through some of these restrictions, obviously, it's very difficult to get people from outside the community to come in and be hired as a police officer, as I look at it. I thought that at one point there were, if any of your parents were on the force, and you would get put in, have special preference, but it's just the disabled. Is that correct?
I'm going to invite the assistant town manager to the podium. She just finished, she thought she just finished serving as the Mass Municipal Association representative on a task force to take a look at the civil service rules and regs. That's going to end up being a permanent, we think. Hoping it was ad hoc, but these commissions never go away. Go ahead.
Sorry, Paul, can you repeat the question again?
I'm not even sure I knew what the question was.
I think it was members of the Department
I guess
of
I'm
Children.
looking at civil service, and I'm saying, okay, the path, you can get out of it if you're just talking about the chief, as an example. But we're going to be in civil service when we do any hiring on the force.
So the question was the criteria, so.
Well, it does, it always falls into the criteria. When you look at the criteria, I just mentioned children of parents that were on the force, and I could see Rob saying no. Okay, so that's not it. Because, but it does affect if one of the parents was disabled, correct?
Disabled in the line of duty.
In the line of duty.
Correct.
But I guess the simple question is, and I'm going to end it here, is I see it being as very difficult to ever get people of color in this department, being what Danvers is. Look at the number of people, how many previous officers on the force have we ever had of people of color? I'm going to venture the number is 0. So there's no way. What I'm saying is the path forward is very, very difficult. How do you do it? And I think maybe you had said this to me before, past discussion somewhere, I heard it at a meeting, that there's a way to have applicants involved from outside the community, but then I'm not sure that that's even a possibility. Am I going in the wrong direction on that one?
So there's two ideas that could address what you're speaking to. Communities can choose to waive, through a process, a rather complicated process, waive the residency requirement for their civil service list, which then opens up your civil service list to the entire state. That can become even more complicated because now you're getting candidates from Springfield, Worcester, Pittsfield, Rowley. They can be candidates from anywhere in the state, and we have a requirement of how far away police officers and firefighters can live in our community. So getting rid of the residency preference does change how your list will look as far as geographically how far people are. You can also do lateral transfers. You can say you would accept a transfer from another civil service community. You cannot take them from non-civil service communities or outside of the state of Massachusetts. And communities will advertise that they're accepting laterals. You have to have a vacancy to do that. You can't add to the department. And then somebody has to be interested. It gets a little twist. Both the appointing authorities from the incoming and the exiting community have to sign to agree, which usually goes okay, but it can be held up if a department is worried about staffing issues and doesn't want to lose an officer.
Right. I'll be honest with you, this particular topic, we could have 5 special meetings and then appoint 5 subcommittees, and that's how much time it would take. So I'm going to stop right there. Thank you very much, though, for your patience.
Thank you. Yes, Kristen?
So I think, I know we dived right in. I just want to kind of acknowledge that this report is, specifically about the police department. But this really happened under the school administration's watch, right? So by the acts not being taken a couple of years ago, we're left here to put it on chief level and the police department to now really clean up this mess. And I just want to acknowledge that because I think it's really unfortunate that we're here. We have to have this conversation because it really should have been handled before. And I think just personally, as I reflect on this, it really, and I communicated this at chief level as well, it seems like from all the information available that the investigation was done well from a criminal perspective, but we really missed the boat as a community looking at this through an ethical perspective. And that's where, as I'm going through this and I'm thinking about this, that's just, for me, as a committee here, I know we've talked about this before, I take accountability for that being a part of this committee because I think we missed the boat. But for this first recommendation, I think Rob has done an excellent job of coming to these meetings, providing as much information as we want about what they're doing. You've shared all these questions before. I mean, when I read this from chief level, this wasn't news to me because you constantly are providing us with these updates. And I think, as the public hopefully gets more interest in our committee, they'll see how transparent this relationship is. So I fully support this recommendation, and I'm so happy with how much of it we're already doing.
Thank you, Kristen. Any other comments, questions? Okay. I don't know, Mrs. Vice Chair, how do we do this? Do we say that we support the I'm not sure how we put this. Yes, Deb?
I have a question and then a possible suggestion. Are we going to vote on each recommendation and whether or not the HRIC supports it? Is that the intention of this tonight? And if so, I'd be happy to make a motion to support recommendation number 1 regarding hiring process.
I think that was the intention, unless someone disagrees.
I don't disagree, except I'm not sure I understand whether we're doing it as an entire report and moving it to the select board. I think, I'm not sure what we're going to do.
I was thinking maybe we have a motion like, I mean, I think this hiring process is fairly extensive. And like Kristen said, the Lieutenant Rob has provided a lot of this information before. And it was going to be more like, we support all these procedures which align with the recommendations that we got from the NAACP. I don't know. Yes, Mr.
Just ask a clarifying question. So the recommendation itself asks you to support a formal test with candidates asking questions which would be inconsistent with civil service, conducting social media pre-screening, which we have done for a long time, and then creating a DEI citizen committee, which I guess we're calling like the counter proposal is we're having the DEI participate in that. So I just wanted to, I guess my clarifying question, is the committee voting, maybe understand the recommendations before you take a vote? Does that make sense?
So that's why I was leaning toward saying that we support this hiring process as presented by the chief and the department, which aligns with what the recommendation was. Does that make sense? Yes, Deb.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be that person. I just wanted to be clear. I think it's just a little confusing with the way the agenda is written, whether we're voting on all the recommendations at once or going piece by piece, because the way the agenda is listed, it seems that it would be probably most appropriate to vote piece by piece on the recommendations. And then if so, before we actually discuss any of the recommendations, there should be a motion on the floor. before we actually engage in discussion. So whether the motion is to support or not support, there should be a motion on the floor before we engage in discussion, just to make sure we're all, parliamentary correct.
Who has read Robert's Rules of Order?
I love that.
Exactly, I'm not a legislator or
We've
a
put
lawyer.
the cart before the horse, I think.
No, I mean, I think technically, maybe technically yes, technically no. Robert's Rules of Orders are there as guidance. They're not necessarily law or ironclad. There's a lot of chair discretion in terms of that, but typically for organizational purposes, that is the process.
Yes, Mr. Mckenna?
Mr. Chairman, I think that putting a motion on the floor before we've had a chance to discuss the thing we're talking about may lead us in the wrong direction. I think having some discussion will lead us to a proper motion, as I think it has on this first recommendation. I think if we had taken a motion first, it probably would have been to accept the recommendation, period. And I don't think that's where we're going now. I think we're going toward accepting approval of the town's process in conjunction with this, or something along that line, rather than just accepting the recommendation verbatim.
That's correct. I agree with you. So that's why I thought a motion like approving the town process, which align with the recommendation number 1, would be appropriate unless there's any objection.
In that case, I will make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Any second?
Second.
Discussion.
Any further discussions? Yes, Paul.
I'm going to vote for this with reserves up here, because I'm not a fan of the civil service the way it is right now. I just feel it's restrictive. And but I'll go along with it at this point. But again, I ask my question, have we ever seen any minority hires? Period. But I will go along with it right now as a separate motion.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, if I can comment? Yeah, on hiring minorities, I mean, I think we have to deal with the question of diversity, which leads us to trust in our police department. I mean, what measures are being taken to ensure diversity, that we do have a representative police force or a police force that represents the population?
I mean, I would say this can go in a lot of directions. My take on it is the civil service as it exists is law. We have to follow the law. And there are some guardrails like, using the DEI and advice from this committee and a lot of things that the town manager who has the authority to do this and the chief, that they take into account. If we want to do something about the civil service, I think that's a topic for a different discussion. That's something we might have to petition, go to town meeting, then go to the state legislature, and then we can do something about it. But within the constraints of the law as we have them now, that's what has to be followed. So I just want to make it clear that we can't be suggesting here that we want to go around the law as it exists. Mr. Town Manager?
If I could offer just generally, and then I would defer to the assistant town manager. We have had minority officers in the past, we presently do not. And with respect to the civil service, once the names are in the system, the process is very prescribed. Danvers is 91 or 92% white, according to the most recent census, which means that 8 or 9% of our community is non-white. So some of the things communities can do is better outreach at the very beginning of that process. It's a very complicated process, it's a very long process, and we've sort of joked about like, hey, you want to be a police officer, keep an eye out for the test that's going to happen sometime in the next 10 to 12 months, and then come back, 3 months after that to do this and do that. So it can be a very overwhelming process, but there are things communities can do at the very beginning of that to try to generate more interest. And I would surely, the assistant manager has been doing a lot regionally in terms of thinking about recruitment. Surely that's something that's going to be part of Jasmine's scope of work. But
Thank you.
The town manager mentioned the commission I was serving on. That commission was specifically tasked with looking at ways to create greater diversity amongst the civil service process across the whole state. Because we're not saying it's not an issue in Danvers, but it's also an issue statewide, the lack of diversity in police and fire positions. So this commission worked for the past too many months to think about ways and recommendations that could be implemented to increase diversity. The recommendations have been made, and that commission's work will continue. But some of the things that we recognized and spoke about is that we are seeing a lack of diversity and a decrease in diversity in veteran and military service, and that's where we're getting most of police officers from. There's a pipeline from military service into police service. So that is one of the issues they're seeing, but we made a recommendation to have the state create a diversity office within the Human Resources Division, which is where civil service is housed, to better work on outreach and initiatives to create diversity in the applicants that are taking the civil service exam, and also create tools that municipalities could use. So we recognize HRD cannot do all the recruitment across the state on their own, but if they create a framework and some information for communities to use, and we are better aligning our time with their recruitment and our recruitment, we could, pull our resources together and do better with diversity recruitment. So there's some other ideas in the report that are coming out about ways to increase diversity, better outreach to the schools. Community colleges have a program for firefighters, but they don't have one for police officers. So there's a recommendation to create a pathway program through community colleges, and especially in areas of the state that have a greater diversity pool, use those community colleges as a trial ground. Those are some of the recommendations. So I think it's important to know that the civil service unit and the state as a whole recognizes this, critical issue, and that we're working together with them to make greater impacts on the civil service system, recognizing there are some broken links there, and then also being able to take away some of the ideas from that commission's work that don't necessarily need legislative action that we could implement on our own. And both our chiefs have heard from me on some of those ideas, and I think we'll continue to talk about them and see if we can work through any of those. So I think it's something we need to work on locally, but also with HRD and the civil service unit as a greater entity as well.
Thank you very much for the clarifications.
Thank you.
Jen. Okay, so what do we do here procedurally? We go back to that motion?
Unless someone wants to amend it, we're ready to vote on it, yeah.
Okay, so the motion was made and seconded. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? None, the motion carries. Kristen, you want to take the next one?
Sure. So to go back to Chief Level's report to us, the recommendation number 2, rebuilding trust with the community. Since November of 2021, the town manager and I have had numerous conversations with members of the community, to include the Anti-Defamation League, the NAACP North Shore chapter, peer leaders at both the town managers and police chief level. During these conversations, we have listened, had engaging conversations, and continued to learn. We look forward to working with Jasmine Ramon, the new Director of Equity and Inclusion, and apply the recommendation of the town's Welcoming Community Working Group.
So, and as I said before we started the report, that the town manager had informed me that the sergeant had asked for the assignment that was accepted by the chief and supported by the town manager. So I don't know if there's any questions or no. Okay. So yes.
This is talking about rebuilding trust in the community. I guess this is probably the place to address this. I realize we're voting on the individual recommendations, but I've got to say I was a little disturbed by the report we got that included those recommendations. My first thing that concerned me was that it was based on an anonymous letter. I've spent many years on boards in this town. I've written plenty of letters myself, both to the newspaper and to boards. Some of them rather incendiary. Some of them where I told people exactly what I thought of them. My name always appeared at the bottom of that letter. When I was on the Board of Selectmen, we had appointed committees that were charged with evaluating the performance of several of the people that was part of our jurisdiction. One year when I was chairman, the subcommittee solicited input from the public and then submitted the letters as anonymous. We had no idea who the letters are from, what their agendas might have been, what their criteria was. We had to throw out the report and appoint a new committee. An anonymous letter isn't worth the toilet paper it's written on. Some valid concerns raised in it, but at the same time, some very disturbing thoughts too. A comment in there about the person thought that the reports they're hearing was, if I find the exact quote here, assumed them to be the typical back the blue Trumpster-fire nonsense we've been seeing long term. If we're trying to be inclusive, Mr. Chairman, and bring the community back together, you don't do it by insulting half the people in the country who voted for a particular president. I don't care whether anyone here voted for him or not. Half the people in this country did. You just discounted half of them as being nonsensical. Other things in here that disturb me, one particularly, the person who wrote this letter, if I can find the bloody thing now, said that I choose to align myself with love by believing the victim until given enough evidence to not to. And then if the evidence comes through to exonerate the accused person, I'll look for another investigation to try to turn that over. Our Constitution says that a person is innocent until proven guilty, not guilty until proven innocent. And this organization, NAACP, Black Lives Matter, and many other minority groups have rightfully and justly said that they have complaints that other communities view them as guilty just because of the color of their skin. So now they're turning around and saying the exact same thing. It's just, I just found the whole thing very disturbing. While I think many of these recommendations make sense, I think we need to be more inclusive and more healing and not have something that's going to drive more wedges into the community. And I think, unfortunately, this report did that. So I'm just expressing my disappointment as founder of this committee and someone who believes in diversity, has worked for over 25 years on this committee and other places. If we were going to vote on that report, I'd have voted no on it. I'll probably vote for all these recommendations, but I'd have voted no on that report. And I'm sorry if I offended anybody. I seem to be getting good at that these days. A little bone in my head that says, don't say that, is worn out. But I say what I think, and that's what I think on that. So I guess I'm finished, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Davey. Thank you. And I would acknowledge that there were some statements in the report that I myself found disturbing. I'll actually have Kristen kind of speak to some of those. But as she does that, we just want to not miss the point as to, you know, what is the bigger picture. Kristen, you want to?
Sure. So again, back to Chief Level's report to this committee. He did want to point out incorrect information that was contained within the report for our knowledge. So he said, please see the following comments regarding incorrect information provided in individual sections of the report. Section 5, quote, we learned that the anonymous victim was not present at the time of both the investigations led by the school district and the police department. Therefore, all findings were largely dependent on compliant students, unquote. Without knowing the anonymous source's identity, I cannot positively confirm that I interviewed him, nor would I to protect the juvenile's privacy. Every member of the team was provided the opportunity to speak with me. Since the conclusion of my investigation on July 14th, 2020, I have not been contacted about the accusations by any players or parents. The next quote is the police nor the school district actively pursued identifying evidence of bullying or hazing and only focused on identifying criminal behavior during the time of the investigations." End quote. During my interviews with the players, I asked specific questions around hazing, including, were you ever physically assaulted or pressured to do anything as part of an initiation to the team, and if they had ever been pressured into participating in certain activities. The next quote, more than half of his visits were met with non-compliant parents who would not permit Chief Level to question their son, and the rest of the meetings were met by team members conveying that they had not witnessed any acts of rape or molestation by other team members, end quote. I met and spoke with 15 out of 22 families, and the interviews centered around criminal activity to include hazing and possible hate crimes. The next quote, the chief admitted that he did not inquire on matters involving bullying, hazing, or overtly racist name-calling in any of his interviews, end quote. The phrase hard R Fridays was not discussed in my interviews. During my interview, the following question was asked. Are you aware of any threats or actions by any hockey team members based on someone's race, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability? This includes on and off the ice. Players were asked if they were ever physically assaulted or pressured to do anything as part of an initiation to the team. Section 6, quote, regarding the mention of the Pink Dragon, G Tuesdays, or Hard R Fridays, these terms were introduced by the anonymous Twitter account in January 2021, as well as mentioned again by the anonymous youth victim that was interviewed by the Globe and Channel 5, end quote. The terms Gay Tuesdays and Hard R Fridays were known at the beginning stages of my investigation. However, the term Pink Dragon was not known by me until the release of the yearbook, the anonymous posts, and the news media stories.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, because it's not really a public hearing, it's what?
It was
Yeah,
presented
yeah.
to us as anonymous, though.
It was a letter from a branch member. We didn't put that branch member's name in the report, but it's not anonymous, and that we knew who it was.
But we had.
Because it's not a public hearing, so unfortunately, yes, thank you, sorry. So do we get a motion here?
I would like to comment on the recommendation first, if that's okay.
Yes.
So regarding the second recommendation, again, as I stated, I think this really should have been managed in his role that he was found to have not met expectations in, which was as a coach, not a police officer. And, you know, I think the culture of, you know, I didn't know, or kind of, yeah, I didn't know, is unacceptable. And it makes me worry about when my own kids are in sports in the Danvers school systems, if that's the culture that's been created. So I personally, I recognize, we've talked as, in different conversations as a committee, we cannot influence hiring in the town. That's not our role, and I don't think any of us want that role here. So just personally, I support this recommendation, and I think it's important in order to move on from this situation. So yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
As she just said, we don't have the authority to order them to remove anybody, so I don't think we can, as such, endorse this recommendation, because we don't have the authority to do so. The situation has been resolved. Officer Baldessari is no longer the coach or the resource officer. So I think the issue, the town has resolved the issue one way or another. So.
We have to be proactive to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Yeah, we don't have the authority to remove him or anyone, but there is culpability. And, you know, we have to be able to deal with that. And that's why I support this recommendation.
Any other questions, comments?
I think that it's important that we, that we've supported with the understanding that we have to be open to things that happen, and transparency is the word, really. And I think that rebuilding trust in the community is extremely important. I think we're taking a great first step by the hiring of a DEI. Congratulations, by the way, you're not a mystery anymore. I'm just wondering when Mr. Barth is going to actually introduce you, because everybody knows who you are. It's on the agenda, right?
He said it's not my agenda.
Oh, okay.
See if I can just make one more.
But anyway, congratulations. Anyway, I do know, this is a little, it seems to we're getting into some things that are already taking place right now. Former coach, former resource officer. I think we should move on and just, I would suggest we move it on, accept it, and then move it to, I guess, to the select board, if that's where it's going. I'm hoping it's going to the select board for their consideration.
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
Deb.
can I make a,
Yes, Deb?
I think this is a question, and I'm not, obviously to the chair through whoever is the appropriate person to answer it. The way I'm reading the recommendation is that, or the way I'm understanding this is that we're supporting a recommendation, not saying this is what you must do going forward, but we strongly recommend that you follow what's written here. So, I mean, I guess my question is to you, Dee, the chair. Is there anything out of bounds with this recommendation? Because my understanding is that there isn't, because it's a recommendation, correct?
We don't make policy.
I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer. But I've expressed privately and publicly my concerns on getting involved in personnel matter. That is really out of the authority of this committee. We are an advisory board to the select board. What I probably would suggest is that maybe we have a motion that supports the, I don't know, because we know what the outcome is here based on this recommendation. We make a motion that supports the chief acceptance of the chief decision in this matter. I don't know how we put it, but we cannot. I'm very reluctant to. And this might displease some people, but I'm very reluctant to get involved in personal matter. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest a motion that says, now that Sergeant Baldessari is no longer in the position, that, taking item 2, the town replace him with someone from the ranks that has a clean slate and participated in the trainings recommended by the NAACP. In other words, we accept the second provision, since we have no authority in the first recommendation.
But even that one, we're telling them how they should hire. I'm not sure.
Well, I think that's what our job is, to suggest. We're playing Jiminy Cricket to the town, basically. We're trying to be their conscience. Maybe we shouldn't, I don't know, but that's what we're appointed for. So I think that we recommend that we suggest they find someone that will do a good job, basically. So I think if we take the second part of that provision and say now that Sergeant Baldessari has left the position or is no longer in the position, which doesn't say whether he left or was taken out or whatever, that they hire someone who is capable of doing the job as we feel it should be done.
Any second?
I'd second it.
Okay. Any discussions? So the motion will be to, can you repeat that again, David?
Sure. Now that Sergeant Baldessari is no longer in the position, that the town replace him with someone from the ranks that has a clean slate and has participated in the trainings recommended by the NAACP.
Can I make it clear?
I would, yes.
The request for reassignment that the chief accepted for the purposes of continuity, because we're about a month and a half away from the school year, is that at the end of the school year, a transition will occur where the chief will make some personnel decisions, certainly work through those with me, with the purpose of having positions in place by the end of the summer going into the next school year. So we're using the summer break as a perfect opportunity. That was the chief's suggestion, and I fully support that.
Let me change the tense on that then. Once Sergeant Baldessari is no longer in the position, that the town replace him, blah, blah, with the rest of the provision, rather than reading it again. Clear enough?
Or how about when the position is replaced?
When his position is replaced.
Yeah.
Well, they're saying that he's gonna be out at the end of the school year. So when he's replaced, that they replace him with someone from the ranks, as it states here.
That a motion?
That's a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussions? Hearing none? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, the motion carries. We now move on to the next one, which
You want me to read?
okay, should we?
Would you like me to read it? Yeah.
Sure.
Sure. So, communicating with the public. Again, back to Chief Level's report to this committee. The Danvers Police Department has never had any intention to cover up the investigation into the allegations against the 2019 to 2020 Danvers hockey team. We coordinated our investigation with the Danvers Public School System and the Essex County District Attorney's Office. As a standard practice, we do not publicize the finding of our investigations, especially when they involve juveniles and when they deal with sensitive subjects. The Danvers Police Department has worked extensively with Attorney Barbara Durgan from the Secretary of State Public Records Division to ensure information obtained during the investigation involving members of the Danvers hockey team was properly and legally released while still protecting sensitive and identifiable information. This was in compliance with the state's public records exemptions. Once again, our priority has been to protect privacy of the juveniles who are interviewed as potential victims. The town manager and I have engaged in conversations with the following leaders: Natalie Bowers, the president of the NAACP North Shore Branch; Dee Dee Schiano, Criminal Justice Committee Chair, NAACP North Shore Branch; local and regional members of the Anti-Defamation League, the Danvers Human Rights and Inclusion Committee. On November 18th, 2021, I spoke at the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee meeting. I discussed the direction of the Danvers Police Department to include training opportunities. Since attending my first HRIC meeting as the Chief of Police 3 days after my appointment on June 17th, 2021, I have committed myself to be available to the committee to discuss any topic, anytime, and attend any meeting. I'm very proud of the relationship between the Danvers Police Department and the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee. This relationship was highlighted in our 2021 CALA assessment. One of our assessors, Chief Carl Schinner of the La Plata, Maryland Police Department, wanted to replicate the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee and the relationship with the police department in his community. In September of 2021, Chairman DeGioco and Lieutenant Sullivan attended a city council meeting remotely to discuss the program and the relationships it had formed. After the meeting, I received an email from Chief Schinner, and he wrote, "I can't tell you how much I appreciate Lieutenant Sullivan and Dr. DeGioco's time. They represented Danvers extremely well. Your agency is doing great things for its community." During one of my conversations with the president of the NAACP North Shore Branch, I offered to attend a meeting and speak with members of the Danvers Ad Hoc Group. Since I was appointed by the Chief of Police in June of 2021, I have made a sincere effort to become more involved in the community. I will continue this goal moving forward and will seek new ways to engage the community.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Hearing none?
I'm gonna say something that, we are recommending the NAAC's report to the school, or to the select board, which is their recommendations, which is number 3. Which, what Kristen just read was the chief's response. Okay, so we're not recommending to the select board the chief's response.
Correct.
We are recommending communicating with the public. And why we get to the first sentence of communicating with the public, up to this point, the public has not heard directly from the police department or Baldessari to this incident that caused much trauma much trauma. How much more information do we need? Everybody's been talking to everybody for months. We've had the chief here, we've had everybody here. So Sergeant Baldessari has decided not to be involved anymore, so we've taken care of that issue too. So I guess, why are we even passing this on to the select board, other than, are we trying to make sure it never happens again? I'm getting a little confused, because we may be voting on something that we don't even, number one, we don't have any power to vote it, Eddie, we're just recommending, but is this in effect necessary? I'll support it if someone can convince me that we're not just running around and sort of chasing our tail a little bit.
Yes, Mr.
I could offer
Kennedy.
just a thought here. Part of the reason that, in conversation, part of the reasons the chief wrote this letter is because after spending 6 to 8 hours in dialogue with the president of the North Shore chapter, the statements publicly were that the town had rejected all of the recommendations. And I think the chief was very frustrated because his department has done a lot of work, both recently and for many years, in terms of engaging with the community, making sure that officers are trained. And I shared these concerns privately with the president, did not get a response. But I know some of the response that you're reading out loud tonight came from the chief out of a sense of frustration. Because, as we made very clear in our hours of dialogue with the president, it appeared to us there was only one point where there was disagreement between the town and the chapter, and that was the role of the sergeant. And the chief wanted to make sure this committee had his thoughts in terms of what's being done currently and has been done for a long time. And just as a point, these recommendations are all non-binding. The NWCP has given this committee a report and asked this committee to consider voting on it. This committee certainly has the prerogative and the authority to do that. It doesn't have to do that. One of the points I would make, by law, we are required to vote on a budget each year. That is state law. This is purely the board's discretion to discuss it, to do whatever it sees fit with it. And I didn't intend to say this, but I just want to share that because in response to what Mr. Pollack said, recommendations were made which give this suggestion that there was no communication with the public, that there was no training occurring within the department. And I know the chief takes a lot of pride in the work they are doing. And he would be the first to admit that they have work to do. But he wanted to offer that perspective alongside the report.
Thank you.
I totally agree with what Mr. Bartha just said. I'm certainly not trying to state the fact that no one's been working on it. I know everybody. I'm just confused. I'm wondering whether we have to vote on this at all. If we want to vote this recommendation, we're voting on a recommendation that in and itself doesn't appear to exist to be a problem. When we first got the report, I read through it, and we were nowhere near where we are now. And I think, in my mind, regarding this particular recommendation, because this is one of the sticking points with me all along that hadn't seemed to be resolved, but now it has been resolved. And I'm of the mind that we don't have to vote on it, but I'll defer to the committee. That's my own personal opinion.
Yes, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tend to agree with Paul, although I think he said this had not been resolved. We just weren't made aware it had been resolved.
Right.
I think a lot of these programs have been in place for months, some for years. I know some of them have been in place for over 20 years because they were put in place with our recommendation back when we had an incident, had to be at least 20 years ago. So, the town has been working on this, the police department has been working on it. And I'm just a little concerned that most of what I'm seeing here is basically them asking the police chief and Sergeant Baldessari to sit down on their knees and beat their chest and beg forgiveness. And, I don't think that's necessary. I think if we move on and get these programs in place and have assurances that the training is going on, I don't think these recommendations here are necessarily necessary.
So I have an idea. What about if we have a motion that's like supporting the chief and the department into their multiple community building initiatives that aligns with those recommendations? What do you guys think?
I want to say one thing. I don't want to
So
minimize
it's not,
it. Go ahead.
it's not that, I mean, we can say we support the chief and the department into their multiple initiatives into community buildings that align with those things is already being done.
So submitting it to us is just pro forma, really. I mean, it's,
Well, it just means that
There
we
it is.
support, we're
Yeah.
supporting those initiatives as a committee. What do you guys think?
Well,
Deb's got her hand up.
Yes,
over there.
Deb?
I think similar to the first recommendation, there's some things in item number 3 that if we were to wholesale recommend, and I want to be clear that I support the work that community members have done around this NAACP, as well as other community partners and municipal employees. This has been a really difficult and long road for people. I, of course, support accountability for people's actions, but similar to recommendation number 1, in recommendation number 3, there might be a little snafu of sorts with Mass General Law, particularly Mass General Law Chapter 150E, which is mandatory subjects of bargaining, and so this would apply to the sergeant, but not to the chief, and so I'm concerned about voting wholesale on a recommendation that would put potentially the town in violation of collective bargaining law. So that's just something that popped as a flag for me. That doesn't mean that it can't, be, a motion can't be made with some kind of substitute language, of course.
I agree with what you're saying, Deb. I think the recommendation to improve communications with the public is important and is necessary. I think, just speaking to what Chief Lovell said, he has been, he's exactly right. From the moment he joined the first meeting, he's been incredibly supportive of all of us. He goes out of his way to create opportunities, whether it was being, the fundraising that they did for the MLK event, or, setting up one-on-one discussions. Dee and I engaged in a discussion with him, when this came out, and he's always been transparent and honest, and I think he's been a pleasure to have on this, join this committee when things come up. So I think, we can agree with the importance of the intent of the recommendation, but we don't all have to necessarily agree with every single statement within the recommendation. And I guess just personally, I don't know if the goal of this is really to take apart every sentence and all agree to it and then take it to the select board and ask them to do something with it. I don't know that wasn't my impression of what we were trying to do. I think we received a report. We were asked to review and acknowledge, and that's what we're doing. So I don't know that we need to take it to any further than that. So based on that, I'm comfortable agreeing with this, but it doesn't mean that I agree with every sentence, and it doesn't mean that this is all encompassing of what we need to do to improve public communications. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah, to answer the first question, we don't have to bring this to the select board, and I don't think that was the purpose of it either, because I think they got the same report.
Exactly.
Yes, Bill?
I would move that we support efforts that have been made by police chief level and by the NAACP to improve communications within our community.
I'll second that. And I'd like to amend it if I could make a friendly amendment to support what they've done and to encourage building upon that with new initiatives to make things better.
Okay. Any further comments?
I think that covers section 4 too, pretty much. And if you want to include that in the discussion,
Yes,
or
Paul.
You all set, Dave? Yeah, I support this, support what Kristen just said, and I also wanted to make a point before she even said it, that I didn't want to minimize the work the NAACP did, too. Because it's taken everybody to get this done, and I think this motion would move it forward, and then we just have to keep moving forward. And in no way would I want to minimize the work the chief has done, because he has been extremely cooperative, nor do I want to minimize the work the NAACP did in their efforts with the town manager and everyone else involved.
Thank you. So, any other further discussions? Here none. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? None? Okay. Now move on to the,
Last one.
I don't know if that last one we actually need to read everything.
I can just summarize it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I-
So again, back to Chief Lovell's report to us. So the last recommendation, further training. So there's a lot of training that the police department is doing. We won't read through everything. I'll just highlight some of them. So there are many hours of police training committees. There's additional trainings. Lieutenant Rob Sullivan and I participated in a 6-session symposium learning about the Holocaust. And so this is what many people participated in on this committee, as well as our community. On January 18th, 2022, the Danvers Police Department hosted an 8-hour training titled Unpacking Our Implicit Bias for 911 Call Takers and First Responders. The class was created and presented by Dr. Demetris Phillips, DBA. I attended this class along with Captain Sanborn, the Criminal Investigation Division, the Community Services Division, and our dispatch supervisor. Lieutenant Rob Sullivan attended a training titled Brown and Blue, Understanding Latino Police Officers. This class was taught by newly appointed Swampscott Police Chief Ruben Quesada. I have committed the Danvers Police Department to participating in the Fair and Equitable Policing Initiative sponsored by the Anti-Defamation League of New England. This is a 4-part webinar that includes the following topics: history of racial profiling, the current threat environment, left, right, and center, conducting a threat assessment for houses of worship, building community trust through engagement. There's mental health trainings that are ongoing, which is a 40-hour training. The school resource officers, specialized training. All of the school resource officers have attended and are certified in crisis intervention, team training, National Association of Resource Officers, and basic and advanced training. And then pertaining to the book club recommendation, currently the Danvers Police Department is facing a staffing crisis, and creating a mandatory book club is unreasonable. The report recommends the following books, and it lists out the books recommended. I have purchased a copy of each book, and they will be made available to members of the department. If interested, an employee can sign out a copy of the book.
Thank you very much. So, do we move to support these actions? I need another motion from someone there.
Is that technically covered under the last motion, Mr. Chairman?
I think so.
What, number 3?
Yeah?
It sounds
I
like
think the
it,
way
yeah.
we worded, I think it covered both section 3 and 4. Unless anybody feels differently.
And
I thought it did.
If I could speak for the chief who can't be here, I know since he's become chief, he's brought a lot of ideas. He's been looking at a program out of Georgetown University that he would like to eventually be able to bring. It's a program that you have to apply to participate in. I believe it's called ABLE, Active Bystanders Law Enforcement. Very intensive training. I looked at it. Anyone can go online, Google it. The introductory video is pretty interesting. And he and I both made very clear to the Anti-Defamation League, to the National League of Cities has a program, Race Equity and Leadership Program, and I've had conversations with their executive director, we've had conversations with the Lappin Foundation, with the North Shore chapter. The chief is open, and frankly, as an organization, we're open to trainings. We have some content area experts in the room, so if people are aware of trainings that would be beneficial not only for the police department, but for town employees in general. part of what Mr. Moen will be helping us with as well, is share this with us, because I think this is an organization that has historically invested in training, education, licensing, safety, et cetera, for its employees, and these trainings are no different. So we're open to any ideas that people want to share with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I think this this concludes that. You move on to. No, we don't. Really brief. Yes, Paul.
It's going to be as brief as I can do, because town manager, last meeting we had here, a month ago, David, previous chairman, Mr. Crane.
David Thompson.
Dave, happens to me all the time. David Thompson mentioned that the Danvers school system, mainly the athletic department, was having a class, a seminar, whatever you want to call it, on a two-day. It was a two-day program that they put on. And the people within the building, Danvers Public Schools and the high school, they were taking volunteers. It was run by Northeastern Universities, and it was the title, Don't Hate the Athlete. And it struck me, and somehow I did something, and I signed up for it. It was free, and I called the athletic director up. I thought I could go in and maybe just sort of sit in the back of the room. And I want to tell you something, it went from 9:30 to 2:30 on a Friday and 9:30 to 2:30 on a Saturday, and it involved race. In-your-face discussions about how you feel, and they were very, very good at bringing out, and we were all volunteers, everybody wanted to be there. And I would recommend you look into it at some point. I can't remember all the title of it and everything, but I want to tell you something. I just have all the answers, and I would never do that, or I wouldn't say this, or how do you respond to this question? And I want to tell you something. It was eye-opening. It was well worth it. It was free, and I commend the administration, and I commend the athletic director on setting it up, because I think he took the lead on it. But I thought I was going to go in there and just sit around, have coffee, and listen to all, didn't happen. You had to get up and had to take part. And I came back, I think, at one of our meetings. I'm not sure which meeting it was, I think. And I recommended that basically anybody, and especially on a smaller scale in the town, 12, 16, 18 people. And so when you're looking at whatever departments you're dealing with, I think it's just fabulous, because it really opens your eyes up. But the key is, it just doesn't work with only volunteers, because those people want to be there. You're preaching to the choir. You have to get those that have a different view and don't want to speak up, or don't want to be challenged. Brief enough.
That's the rub.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Well, I want to thank you, all of you, for these comments. And one last thing about it, I want to thank the chief, who is not here, and the department for providing the level of details that are provided here speaks to how much he values these issues that we all care about. And I think I was really impressed by that, and I hope that this relationship continues. We were created in 1994, and from the beginning of this committee, we had a police liaison on the committee. I always, to quote my mentor here, Dr. Charlie, America's exceptionalism is not because we are perfect. It's because we always strive to be a more perfect union. And I think that we are moving forward, we are making progress, and I'll just urge all of us to continue in this direction. Are we going to have more mistakes along the way? Absolutely. But as long as we continue to move forward, I think that it will be great for us, it will be great for everyone in this town, and we will have a better Danvers. So I want to thank the town manager for being here to kind of give us all these clarifications as well. And Lieutenant Rob Sullivan, some of this was not new to us. You've given us a lot of this in the past, so thank you very much. And to the NAACP members who are here, I also want to thank you for paying attention to these issues. we are looking forward to continue to collaborate and use your expertise to really better ourselves. So please, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if
Yes.
I could, I came down on you folks so hard a little bit earlier about the way the report was written, but we do appreciate your involvement and opening our eyes to some things that we're all bigots. I hate to admit it, but everybody sitting in this room to a certain extent is biased and a bigot. To a certain extent, we try to hide it, we try to work with it and get over it, but we all have our biases, and we need to have our eyes open sometimes. I hope you'll take my comments earlier as constructive criticism about how to write a report. But we do appreciate your involvement, and we hope you'll stay involved and help us through some of these difficult times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now move back. Actually, I'll move on to number 9, which is on the agenda, the hate crime report, the hate crimes database update. I know we had discussed about having the incidents that were occurring on the website, and if you recall during last meeting, Paul, I think, was the one who had concerns into just having the report on some website somewhere. He and a couple members of this committee didn't think that was a good idea to just have a report, put it on a website, and then nobody knows what's going on. So the town manager and the chief picked up on that, and I think he has some updates for us as to ways to make the information to the public more visible and to kind of put the incidents that occur in a context. So, Mr. Town Manager?
Well, I appreciate your reference a few minutes ago to mistakes along the way, because I would like to start this update by acknowledging one of my own mistakes along the way. No, what's wrong with the statement? That was the machine. I had nothing to do with it. So I just passed around, there are a few extra copies here, a packet of information, and I'm going to describe what that is for those who don't have it, and then I'll speak to it. So the first page is a listing of the 8 distinct incidents that have occurred in our town over the past year. Nobody in this room needs to be reminded that it's been a tough year. We've been dealing with a lot of issues that have been difficult and challenging. And you can see from April of 2021 until February of this year, we've had 8 incidents that have occurred. And I want to start by saying, report it out. The mistake I'd like to acknowledge is that as you look at this table, between November 10th and the week before Christmas, December 20th, we had 4 incidents in our schools and at a town park. So we were having an incident, and by incident, these were all incidents of graffiti, homophobic or racist or anti-Semitic graffiti that was appearing in bathroom stalls in the middle school, or in one case on a metal bench next to the softball field. And we're having about 1 a week. So once a week, we would fire up the collective leadership engine and start issuing another breathless statement that something had happened. And between the 3rd and 4th incident, actually it was after the 4th incident, I had the brilliant idea that we would put out a statement saying, we're going to try to differentiate between things like a small swastika discovered on top of a metal bleacher that may have been there 2 days or 2 years at one end of the spectrum, and accusations of racial profiling at a Danvers business at the other end of the spectrum. That was a spectacular disaster, and 3 days later, a clarifying statement was issued saying, just kidding, we're going to continue to report these things out, and we have. And so what I wanted to talk about tonight is we don't want to double down on a bad idea with a second bad idea. And I think I didn't see the meeting, but I would assume to the point Paul was making, you know, what you have in the packet. These are each of the statements that were issued either by the town or by the schools. Typically, the schools would send them out through their parent communications, and then normally Jen, as our communications director, would pick them up and put them out on social media as well. So we want to make very clear we will continue to communicate these incidents to the public through the appropriate means. Sometimes that's going to be an email to the parents of our 3,300 students. Sometimes that's going to be a traditional press release. Sometimes it's going to be a social media post. We spent about an hour on Jasmine's second day trying to talk through the utility of a table like this, and we just don't see it. We haven't found any examples out there where other communities are trying to create these things. When you're taking an incident that is described in a statement and trying to distill it into 3 distinct cells, and you're saying something like racially motivated violent crime, that leaves a whole lot to the imagination if it's simply a table existing on a web page. But you're never going to be able to put enough context into something like that to make it useful. And so the recommendation that we came up with, the Assistant Town Manager, the Director of Equity, and myself, is that this table will continue to exist. It'll be a tool that Jasmine can use with this committee to track and monitor what's happening. And then we will continue to put out statements and talk about these things. But we agree, we don't see much utility in having a table exist on a website where somebody from the LA Times can come and find it and then breathlessly write more stories about our town. So we want to sort of use it as a tool, a working tool for this committee, but we'll continue the practice that we quite candidly never stop, which is to communicate these things when they happen. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. That wasn't, your biggest mistake was when you used the word website. And with my lack of technical ability, it just froze my brain, but thank you very much.
Well, there are 16-year-olds who don't know what a press release is. Yeah. And 5-year-olds who don't know what social media is. So we want to use the appropriate.
Yeah, where do I fall in on that whole thing?
So, although my 95-year-old grandfather used Facebook more effectively than I ever did.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Can I just say on behalf of the committee that we support that idea? Am I saying nods? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Sorry, I'm kind of going back and forth here with the agenda. I will now move back to item number 5, which is the introduction of the Director of Equity and Inclusion. My apologies for my voice. I just got tested before I came here. I'm negative, so it's just allergies. So I will rely on Christine again to help me read the press release that was issued by the town manager.
Okay. So the town of Danvers has chosen Ms. Jasmine Ramon to serve as the community's first Director of Equity and Inclusion. A brand new position for the town, Ms. Ramon will provide leadership in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion in partnership with staff, residents, and stakeholder groups. The position will also serve as a resource to the Danvers Public Schools and Peabody Institute Library in support of their DEI goals. The events of the past few years, both locally and globally, have elevated the importance of establishing a culture of equity and inclusion, both as an organization and as a community, said Steve Bartha, town manager. Ms. Ramon emerged from a field of roughly 20 candidates as the clear choice for this position, and we are both grateful and excited that she chose to join our team. Prior to accepting this role, Ms. Ramon served as the Assistant Director of the Latinx Center at Tufts University, and she also works as an independent DEI consultant. Ms. Ramon holds an MA from Northeastern in Sociology and a BA from Alfred University in Communication Studies. Originally from Newburgh, New York, Ms. Ramon relocated to the Boston region for graduate school. In her free time, she enjoys coaching youth soccer. Ms. Ramon is thrilled to learn more about and celebrate the Danvers community members and work with a dynamic team in support of positive social change. She will begin her full-time role in late April.
So exciting.
Finally.
Paul just said finally. So I don't know if, not to put you on the spot, but if you want to say something, your mother.
I have my night voice. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Again, I'm Jasmine Ramon. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Obviously, I'm excited to be here. It's been a very welcoming first week. I am most excited about establishing what my role is in community. So yes, we have the cookie cutter job description that got me in the door, but really I want to make sure that that role is tailored to Danvers, because obviously it's a magical place, and that was the pull for me. So I'm trying to make myself as accessible as possible. Catch me now while my calendar is relatively open. But yes, absolutely. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions, or even just to say hello and get some FaceTime in. Again, I am super excited to be joining you in this work. While it's hot, I think once we, as we are transitioning, you know, from what happened with the hockey team and so on, we really are setting ourselves up to be proactive rather than reactive, and that's a very wonderful space to be in. And so I very much look forward to connecting with you all individually. And again, thank you for choosing me.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't know. Anything?
I was just told my microphone's been dead the whole night, so I don't. No, I mean, I think between the press release and what Jasmine said, we are very excited. We advertised this position in October, and we said from the very beginning we were going to fill it right and not fill it fast. And so we took our time, and we had about 20 people apply. The chairman helped us with the interview process. We also had the library director and the soon-to-be former assistant superintendent, Keith Taverna, help us as well. And he threatened that if we didn't hire Jasmine, he was going to take her with him to his next position. So we're very excited. I have given my guidance to Jasmine out of the gate. I do take great offense at the description of it being a cookie-cutter job description because we used 12.5 examples and really spent a lot of time perfecting it, although, as we know, it probably still needs work. But my guidance has been listen and learn, get to know the community, get to know the people. She is very accessible, and I know she's very excited to meet and listen and learn about what matters to you. So we're thrilled. We had our first leadership team meeting this morning, and so we're off and running.
Thank you. Welcome, Jasmine. And I think this is kind of not on the agenda, but out of order. If we can just start by David Mckenna. You want to just introduce yourself really quick in a few seconds, and I'll go around. I think that's important.
I'm Dave Mckenna. I founded the organization. I was selectman for 12 years, and I'm the one with the big mouth. And welcome aboard, and the timing is perfect. You can see you got your hands full. Then we're hopeful that you can handle the job and help get us in the right direction. We need some help right now.
I'm Donna Hopkins. I'm a realtor. I'm also a library trustee. I'm on this committee. I'm just so glad that you're here. We been floundering for a while, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to give us some direction and a lot of guidance and where we want to go and how we can best get there. So I'm just thrilled that you're here. Welcome again.
I am Paul Pollack. I'm retired, and every time we have one of these meetings, I tell my wife I'm not going to open my mouth up at all. Never happens.
Never going to happen.
Never. But you said one thing I really, really love and enjoy. Proactive rather than reactive. Now, I've used that myself, but I thank you very much for coming and agreeing to be here. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm D. Joko, the chair of this committee. We've met several times now, so welcome. I'm super excited and looking forward to the work.
Hi, I'm Kristen Perkins. I'm the vice chair of this committee. I'm a Danvers town meeting member, and I work in biotech full-time. And my family owns a small business in town that offers inclusive sports for kids. So I want to learn more about soccer coaching. You might be a good resource for me. Welcome, thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Gamer. I'm so happy you've joined us in our hour of need.
Charles Desmond, welcome aboard. We're looking forward to all the great work that you're going to be doing. Thank you for taking the position and sharing your wisdom and insight with us.
I'm Bill Graham. I've been in the community about 4.5 years, and so I'm relatively new also.
Hi, Jasmine. I'm Eric Crane. I'm the chair of the school committee. And also the liaison to this committee, and very excited to have you joining us. We refer to our school district, our goal is to be an equity-seeking district, and we're really looking forward to any help, advice, collaboration that you can provide. So this, we hope this will be an exciting partnership, and welcome aboard. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Deb Giswaldo. I am a public school educator and labor organizer, and I'm also a town meeting member, and I'm really excited that you are here in Danvers. Like everyone else has said, we could use some guidance, and I just hope that you don't feel like everything is being put on your shoulders, and that the community remembers that you are not a panacea for all of the things happening, and that the community needs to work alongside you. So thank you so much for being here.
And I'm Eileen Page. I used to work in HR here. Now I'm just here for this for the past 2 years. So it's exciting to have someone full-time doing this and kind of be able to fully dedicate to this group, because it's come a long way in 2 years. And it's definitely, you know, you've got a lot going on. So good luck.
We do know each other.
We do, yeah.
Rob Sullivan, and the Police Department liaison to this committee. Welcome, and looking forward to working with you.
Thank you so much, all. Thank you. I think I'll take a 2-minute recess, and then we'll move on. So it's 8:38, so we can get back 8:39. We can get back at 8:41. Thank you. This gives the chance to the people. They could do it on a different day, but not on Juneteenth. And I think our event was scheduled for June 19. I spoke with Kristen about that, and looking at the calendar, it's so tight and extremely difficult to change from the 19th. So maybe this year we will be unable to partner with them. But for the next year, we can kind of do that ahead of time, so we have a fixed date for the event. And then we'll also have to submit something to the town manager about the Juneteenth, because it's going to be similar to the Pride event. Right?
I think, do you mind if I say something?
Yeah, sure.
I think, you know, with Eileen transitioning off of this committee in the near future, I think the subcommittee probably needs to reconvene. We need someone, you know, Eileen has always kind of stepped in to be a leader for the subcommittees. I think we need someone for that subcommittee to step in and take that role. Mary Beth Very with the Danvers Cultural Council had reached out a while back. We talked about in these meetings to offer financial support for whatever the event we wanted to do. But we haven't told her yet what we want to do with that, and they need details. Otherwise, that money is going to be given to the Danvers Hue event that's being hosted on June 4th. So I think the subcommittee needs to probably meet and figure out, you know, I would think we would want that financial support, so how are we going to use it? So I don't know offhand who the subcommittee members are, but I kind of stepped in just to, you know, let Mary Beth know we are having this meeting, we're talking about it, we'll follow up with her. I'm not in a position to lead that subcommittee, so we would need someone on the committee to do it.
I can tell you in 1 second. Let me just find the names.
Okay.
Sure. And while she's looking for the subcommittee members, I think last year we also had a Danvers Juneteen proclamation that we submitted to the select board, but we had tailored it to last year only. So I think we had discussion as to should we just have it as something that's there, or should we go back every year? And this committee said we wanted to go back every year. And I know Christine was asking, we may want to speak with the Honorable David Mills and see if the select board can actually just take it, so we don't have to keep going back to them, and they can actually do it on their own, since it's going to be the same wording for the most part anyway. So that's also something the subcommittee is going to be working on.
So the subcommittee for Juneteenth is Dee, Bob, Donna, Deb, and Dr. Charlie.
Okay, I will lead the subcommittee, and I'll reach out so we can connect and decide on the event.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So that was it for Juneteenth and the Pride. The next item on the agenda is the establishment of the scholarship subcommittee. And I told Kristen that I was gonna recuse myself from any scholarship discussion. I did it a few years ago when my son was graduating, and I'll do the same now because I believe my daughter might be an applicant. So Kristen is gonna lead that for the committee.
Sure. So if everyone remembers last year, we kind of updated our process for the scholarship subcommittee and revised the criteria. So I'm just going to remind everyone what that will look like, and then we can kind of talk about the next steps. So I'll read the criteria now. The Danvers Human Rights and Inclusion Committee is a cohesive task force against anti-Semitism, homophobia, intolerance, racism, sexism, and bigotry. We partner with police, school administration, and several community partners on events to create a positive atmosphere for a multicultural community. We stand against hatred and support those who experience marginalization due to their age, gender, race, ethnicity, religious beliefs, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status. Each year, the HRIC awards up to $2,000 in scholarship funds to seniors pursuing continuing education of any kind who best exemplify the committee values and not only talk the talk but walk the walk. The HRIC will not consider the following factors in their award of scholarships: the student's GPA, grades, or honor/AP status, the student's participation in athletics or extracurricular activities unrelated to the mission of the HRIC, the student's household income or occupations of parents or guardians, the student's intended institution of continued learning, the student's race, color, national origin, age, religion, creed, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. So the application process is to submit an essay no longer than 2 pages outlining how you embody the values of the HRIC's mission statement in your extracurricular activities, relationships with family and friends, and as a member of the Danvers community. Consider what you've done within the community. Maybe you gathered friends to attend an annual Pride celebration or volunteered at the People to People food pantry, and what you've done outside of Danvers, like serving on a mission trip abroad or organizing a charitable cause. Most importantly, tell us how you plan to continue this work through your continuing education and into adulthood. At least 2 letters of recommendation are required that can attest to your community work. However, they do not need to be from teachers. Letters of recommendation should be written by those who know your contributions best, whether that be a group advisor, mentor, pastor, or supervisor. So this is the criteria that was provided. We also updated the process where all candidates will be anonymized. Is that how I say it? So their identifying information will be removed. I have an example. This was also shared, what was it, maybe last June, July? Last
Sometime
year.
summer.
Yeah.
Actually, no, April.
April.
April
Okay.
last year we
So
did
this
this,
was shared last year, but you can have a look, everyone. But it basically just outlines what's important to us. It doesn't really matter if anyone remembers from years past. It's the standard kind of seniors complete this, and it's all this information about how much their family makes and who they are and all these things that we didn't really feel like it actually spoke to our mission. So we really wanted to narrow it down. So what will happen is we received the scholarship applications. They were sent to Eileen. Eileen will then create this anonymized version using the information in the applications. The anonymized versions will be provided to the subcommittee members to review, and then we will meet, like we've done in years past, to decide whether we would like to give the full $2,000 to one candidate or split it up between a number of candidates.
Or not give it at all.
Or not give it at all. That's right. if people, haven't met our expectations. The scholarship recipients need to be decided by May 17th. And we can have 5 committee members serve on this subcommittee. So I would love to be one of the 5. I don't know if anyone else. Donna, okay. Anyone else? Bob. Okay. One more? Anyone? We can have 4. Okay. If anyone changes their mind, they can let me know. And I'll set up a meeting in the next week or so that we can get this started.
Give the names for the minutes.
Yes, the names of the subcommittee members. Myself, Donna, Bill, and Bob.
It's the same group as last year, actually, minus Amanda.
We can check with her. Maybe she's the 5th that she'll want to do it.
Yeah, we'll ask.
Okay. Any questions?
Perfect. Thank you very much. We got through that agenda. So I see we omitted that, but I'll put it on the new business and have, I don't know if Eric had any school liaison updates?
Microphone's about to fall apart, but I hope you can hear me. So first of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And news from the school committee front this month. Many of you know that Dr. Lisa Dana indicated that she is going to retire as of August 31st. She'll remain on medical leave until that date. Dr. Dana served this community for 14 years as superintendent, and I believe 10 or 12 years as teacher and assistant superintendent. She served this community well, and her primary dedication when I think of Dr. Dana's work was that she was really student-oriented, and the town will in fact miss her as its superintendent. So we wish Dr. Dana well. I hope she has a happy retirement. We are also looking for, let me back up. So we'll be entering a superintendent search, and Alice Campbell and Robin Doherty of the school committee have appointed them as the school committee search. They're both going into their 2nd year. I think they'll bring new voices to the search, and I know they'll do a great job, so I know they're looking forward to that. They're very excited about that. We're also interviewing currently for a human resources person and a business manager, which really is because Keith Taverna, who is also leaving us, wore so many hats in this town. He's done a great job for us, and it's unfortunate that the perfect job opened up for him elsewhere, but we'll miss Keith. So we're going to replace that position with a new HR manager and a new business manager who will work closely with the town on those matters. So lots happening, but all of it, I think, is moving in a positive direction. From the standpoint of what this committee is probably most interested in is that we, on April 12th, had a series of culturally responsive read-alouds in the school system. And they dealt with, at the higher grade levels, transgender issues, that sort of thing. At the lower grade levels, the readings were more benign. I'm talking about like K through 3. They were more involving with, I think one book might have been The Boy Who Wore a Tutu. There are other books about just students who kind of march to the beat of their own drum, so to speak. And the idea was hopefully to plant the idea with children to be accepting of people who are different. That was the whole purpose of it. In the weeks leading up to it, we had informed parents that this was going to happen, and it's funny that we, like anything, we had a small number of parents who really were upset about it and indicated to us that they represented a much larger group of parents. The primary issues they raised were that students who were that young didn't need to hear about this kind of information. And of course, the fact is, educationally, what we hear is just the opposite, that students are never too young to start hearing about semi-complex topics as long as they're presented in a way that is appropriate for them. And clearly, from what I read, there's no question in my mind this was done appropriately. The other issue we had with the parents felt that we were essentially getting in the way of their rights to have these kinds of conversations with their children when they felt it was correct. So those were two, and most people who objected almost to a person claimed they didn't have a problem with someone being transgender or someone being gay. Some people, I think, confuse the notion of gender and sexuality, which it's really not. They're two separate things. But in any event, once in a while, when you got below the surface, someone talked about, well, you're indoctrinating our students. There was a reference to men being sort of upset that we were getting in the way of their presenting their feelings of masculinity to their sons. A few people told us that they were thinking of pulling their children out of the school system because we did this, which is sort of sad. And at the same time, there was a pretty vibrant online discussion where there were parents and students, former students, who posted, who said it's about time you're doing something like this, and that maybe if this had been done years earlier, their experience in school might have been better and different for them. And so, it was heartening to see the positive responses to what we're trying to do, because all we are trying to do is to build a community where people are accepted for who they are. So we went forward with it, and I think, as many people will say, that no roofs fell in, the building's still open, the kids are still going to school. We haven't had too much negative feedback. But I think it is a message in terms of the different perspectives that people have in town and the work that still has to be done on acceptance in the community, not just in the schools, but all around us. But that's an example of one of the things this year that we're trying to do. So beyond that, I've talked about Lisa's retirement. I really guess that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Eric. And I thought you would talk about it, but I attended the last two school committee meetings, and I was just blown away with the students' presentations. I think the last one was Highlands, and I said, I wish my kids had that when they were going to Highlands.
Yeah.
So I would say, this is obviously just one snapshot at a specific period of time, but I was very impressed with the level of confidence that the students spoke with.
They really were remarkable, weren't they?
They were amazing, and they seemed to, it was genuine. Sometimes, I can't get in anybody's heart, but just from my observation, these kids wanted to be there. They enjoyed the topics, and they were just speaking like adults.
Yeah.
With a good level of confidence. So that was very good to see. And I'll also say that we've had a lot of turmoil with our students and the issues of the past 2 years. And the high school senior who spoke at the last committee meeting wanted to make it clear that whatever happened 2 or 3 years ago should not be something that they'll carry on their back for the rest of their life.
Yeah, this is the young lady who worked on the film.
That's correct.
Video that we're using to hopefully, get out into the community, and particularly to the middle schoolers who are looking forward to coming to the high school, that there is a lot going on there that they can and will be able to take pride in.
That's right.
Yeah.
And as a parent who also have students within the school, I second that. I'm worried that this would taint their future in some ways. So I urge all of us to continue to really, not that we ignore anything, we have to address them as they occur, prevent them from happening in the future, but also give credit where we see something good happening.
Yeah.
I think that what the students at the high school are doing now to change the culture is really commendable. And I'm sure I can speak for this committee that we're pleased with that. Again, like I said earlier, we'll make mistakes, but I think that the students are really taking on the task of changing the culture, and it will take time. As Shea Boulay once said, it will go at the speed of trust.
Yep.
We can't say it's going to happen next year. It's going to take time, and we just want to continue to create these safe spaces. Well, I said safe spaces, but I think Jasmine told me it's actually brave spaces. So we want to create these safe and brave spaces more and more for people to really be themselves and speak out when they see something that's wrong.
I mean, I've done this a long time, and there are now and have always been many more students at the high school and in the schools generally who do things that they can be proud of and that we can and should be proud of as a community than there are students who act otherwise. And that doesn't mean you ignore students who aren't contributing to the positive culture, and we need to continue to work on that. But there are a lot of good students who really work hard and care about their school, about their town, and there are going to be some students who do some great things in the future for the world. So that always keeps me coming back.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Lieutenant Rob, we spoke so much about a lot of things today. Do you have any?
I think it's fair to say the police have monopolized the agenda for the evening. Everyone's heard quite enough about us for 1 month.
Thank you, thank you. Any other new business? Here, none? Sorry, I feel like I wasn't able to speak, and I'm speaking the whole time. I'm not sure what the appropriate thing to do is, but I just want to remind us, not only on this committee, that we are bound by some ethics rules, either in person or online. We should be held to a higher standard. I hold myself to a higher standard, and I expect every member of the committee to do the same. There was a resident who, I'm not sure, I don't have any details, who expressed some concerns about something that was said from a member of our committee. I have no other detail than that. She walked out right after. But regardless, and we probably will get more information, but I just want to remind all of us that we should really preach by example and just be bound by those ethics rules. It could get pretty rough online. That's why I usually stay away from it. And I urge people in this town, like Maureen Bernard would say, let's be kind. I don't want to use the word kind, but let's be open-minded and kind of not have that tunnel vision and understand that people can have different views and just be very respectful. So, just that.
Just to be fully transparent, that comment was about me. And I had sent an email in my capacity as a private citizen and a political and labor organizer from my union email address to another union leader asking, and I'll be happy to show you the email so you can see exactly what was said, asking a question. And someone sent that email to the person who spoke at public comment. And then I received a message from that person today and interacted back and forth. I did not refuse to meet with that person. My calendar simply will not allow me to meet before the election. Anyone who knows me knows that my calendar is one of the most horrifying things on the face of the planet. And so I just wanted to clear that up, that I am very respectful of ethics laws and all of that because it's also part of my job outside of here. So I just wanted to be fully transparent that that comment was about me and that I was inquiring to do some research about who I should vote for and also acting in my role, in my job, in my private life.
Thank you for the clarifications. Any other new business? Hearing none, I would need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Any second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. Good night, Danvers.